This chapter develops the IS schedule, which describes the relationship between real interest rates and aggregates output when the market for real goods and services is in equilibrium. There are two definitions that we need to know, which is planned expenditure and aggregate demands. Planned expenditure is the total amount of spending on domestically produced goods and services that households, businesses, the governments, and the foreigner wants to make. Aggregate demand tells the quantity of the goods and services and demanded in an economy at given price level. There are four types of spending, which is consumption expenditure, planned investment spending, government purchases, and net exports. Next few slides, I will talk about these in detail. Consumption expenditures and the consumption function. Keynes reasoned that consumption expenditures is related to disposable income, the total income available for spending. Disposable income equals to aggregate output minus taxes. Consumption expenditures is described by the consumption function, which indicates that consumption expenditures will rise as disposable income increases. There are two types of investment, which is fixed and inventory. Fixed investment is planned spending by firms on equipment, structures, and planned spending on new residential housing. Inventory investment is spending by firms on additional holdings of raw materials, parts, and finished goods, calculated as the change in hoarding of these items in a given time period. Inventory investment is much smaller components of investment than fixed investment. Planned investment spending is equal to planned fixed investment plus the amount of inventory investment planned by firms. Planned investment expenditures and hence aggregate demands is negatively related to real interest rate because the rise in the real interest rate reduces both planned investment spending and net exports. An increases in financial frictions raises the real cost of borrowing and hence lower investment spending and aggregate demand. As we saw in the aggregate demand equation earlier, government purchases added directly to aggregate demand. We assume that government purchases are also exogenous, which we say that government purchases are set at fixed amounts G bar. The government effects spending through tax because disposable income is equal to income minus tax, and disposable income affect consumption expenditure. Higher taxes reduce disposable income for a given level of income and hence cause consumption expenditures to fall. The government's taxes are exogenous and are fixed amount T bar. The government also affects planned expenditure by increasing spending, which directly rise aggregate demands or taxes, which indirectly affect aggregate demands by influencing disposable income and hence consumption expenditure. Real interest rate influences the amount of net export through the exchange rate. In other words, the price of one currency in terms of other currencies. When US real interest rate rise, US dollar assets earns higher return related to foreign asset. People then wants to hold more dollars, so they bid up the value of dollars and thereby increases its value related to other currencies. Thus, we see that a rise in the real interest rate, which leads to an increase in the value of the dollar, it turns leads to a decline in net export. The amount of export is also affected by the demands by foreigners for domestic goods, while the amount of imports is affected by the demands by domestic residents for foreign goods, which is the level of net exports that is treated as exogenous. Net export function equation tells us that net exports are positively related to autonomous net export and are negatively related to the level of real interest rate. The level of aggregate output when the good market is in equilibrium is determined by the condition that aggregate output equals aggregate demand. IS curve traces out the combinations of the real interest rate and aggregates outputs for which the good market is in equilibrium. Why the economy heads towards the equilibrium. As I said earlier, interest rate and planned expenditures are negative relationship. Interest rate and net exports are also negative relationship. IS curve is the point at which the total quantity of goods produced equals the total quantity of goods demanded. Output tended to move towards a point on the curve that satisfies the goods market equilibrium. There are the few factors that IS curve shift to the right or shift to the left. There are the situations that IS curve shift to the right. First, autonomous consumption. A rise in autonomous consumption would rise aggregate demands and equilibrium output at any given interest rate. Second, autonomous investment spending. Third, autonomous net export. All these autonomous spending is increases, then IS curve shift to the right. There is another factor that shifts the IS curve, which is changes in financial frictions. An increases in financial frictions raises the real cost of borrowing to firm and hence causes investment spending and aggregate demands to fall. Let's talk about the situations that IS curve shift to the left. In previous slide, we talked about the situations that IS curve shift to the right because increases in autonomous spending. Conversely, decreases in autonomous spending, then IS curve will shift to the left. What about the changes in taxes? At any given real interest rate, a rise in taxes causes aggregate demand and hence equilibrium output to fall, thereby shifting the IS curve to the left. Conversely, a cut in taxes at any given real interest rate increases disposable income and causes aggregate demand and equilibrium output to rise, shifting the IS curve to the right. This is the summary of what I explained last two slides.